This is making me so angry. I thought I had this problem licked. But no. Back to technical problems. What the hell?
Sunday I'm going.
There's been an update to this thing, and it just no longer works the way it used to. I had it working the other day, and it's now not cooperating. Damn it! It's very frustrating. Anyway, I'm gonna make this video, and then I'm gonna have to go back and figure out why this isn't working. Very upsetting. Anyway, I'm back on the High Line. I'm heading to the post office with some mail for Nina. Her and her nasty lawyer, they don't like it when I tell people about things I'm taking to the post office, but they don't really have a say in the matter. It's my right to discuss public filings in the court. That's actually what this filing is all about. Well, they'll get upset saying I'm revealing personal information about the Arlington Circuit if I show the address. But anyway, what I wanted to tell everybody here is, boy, that's so frustrating that it's not working with the live. Oh wait, it is live. Huh. Very crazy. All right, well, that makes me feel better. I'm very confused as to how this operates, but maybe it was working before and I didn't even know it. I don't think so, though. This is the super frustrating process of trying to go live. So I guess we're live on YouTube, but not on X. Well, welcome, everyone. Yes, that Thomas Crooks, alive, not dead on the roof. Well, yeah, he's still alive now, right? Not dead on the roof. Okay, so I'm glad that we're at least live on YouTube, it seems, right? So let's talk about what I'm doing at the post office. Going to deliver the latest filings here to Nina. See, that's interesting. I feel invigorated knowing that it's live. Before I was just resigning myself to talking to the thing and uploading it later, and that was disappointing. This is an idiotic filing that I'm responding to from Nina's attorney, where they're complaining, saying that I'm making filings, frivolous filings, that are, causing her to incur legal fees, and then they're responding to them. And so what I'm basically saying is, if you think it's frivolous, why don't you ignore it? And then if you're right, the court will agree and say, Jason's an idiot, the filings are struck, and you're out. But instead, I am live. See, there we go. Okay, so it's live on X, it's live everywhere. I gotta figure out why that wasn't working the way I thought it would, but interesting. The point is, they're trying to get me to pay their bill. I've entered like 4 or 5 different motions. What happened was, 2023, Nina made up a whole bunch of crap saying that she wanted a restraining order against me. Now, the way the law works in Virginia, and it's important for people to know, I'm not an attorney. None of this is legal advice. I can't help you with your legal cases. You shouldn't want legal advice from me because it's possible that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a very good track record in court. But as I read the law and just anecdotally share my opinion about it with you, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you got to have what's called true threats. You say something mean about a person or you criticize them, they can't just go and get a restraining order against you and put you through all kinds of court process and, infringe on your rights. You have to make true threats of violence. And the person has to reasonably fear for their safety, or I don't have it right in front of me, but actually let's look at it. Let's look it up. We will look up the Virginia statute restraining order, true threats. Yeah, protective order. prohibiting acts of violence, force, or threat, or criminal offenses that may result in injury to person or property. And then they go on that say that an act of violence, force, or threat means any act involving violence, force, or threat that results in bodily injury or places one in reasonable apprehension of death, sexual assault, or bodily injury. Such acts include, but not limited to, forceful detention, stalking, criminal sexual assault in violation of Article 7. So, I mean, they're talking about threatening to do something, take some action that is criminal and violent. And we see people doing this on the internet all the time, by the way. They've said it about me. George's brother has repeatedly published this statement that was made in a live stream about me, where people said, go kill him. Now, we don't know who it was. Obviously, it was some random name on YouTube years ago, but they love to do this sort of stuff. I've never made any threat against Nina. Nobody should threaten Nina. Nobody should do anything to Nina. Nobody should ever do anything based on what I say, apart from sponsoring the show. You can do that on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. Helps me a lot. You can do it on odyssey.com/@crowdsourcethetruth. You've got to get that AR cryptocurrency, and thank you to the people who have been doing that. If you've been on Odyssey, and there were a lot of people there, I know I encouraged a lot of people to go to Odyssey. It is good technology, and you can still subscribe for free, but you can't access the sponsor exclusive videos anymore unless you use that cryptocurrency, and people who have been on there for the last 3 months or so have been getting the show for free. So thanks to the people who have gone on to paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth and made a one-time sponsorship payment. You could resume your sponsorship on subscribestar.com or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And what's relatively new is people who follow me on X @JG_CSTT. You can now subscribe there and also get the sponsor exclusive content and help me in this counter lawfare effort. See, they want to engage in lawfare. And by that I mean she wants to go tell the court, oh, what actually happened was I did a factual news report that a lot of people saw. You can see it on X. Go to the highlights tab. It's in there. Nasty Nina is a disinformation diva. And remember what she was doing. She was the director of the Disinformation Governance Board, where she was basically asking Elon Musk to grant blue check certified Twitter users the authority to edit other people's comments. So if you put something on Twitter and some certified user, presumably Nina, decided that what you said wasn't factual or accurate or good, they want to be able to edit it. So if you said, Hunter Biden's laptop contained a bunch of videos and photos of him smoking crack and doing stuff with hookers, if they decided that was no good, they could take that off. They'd say, no, that was Russian, that laptop. Nina wanted to be able to do that. She wants to edit facts and news according to her. Deny your right to, access the First Amendment, speak your mind. It's crazy. And that's what she's doing to me now. So, you see, I never threatened her, and I don't want anyone to threaten her. I would never hurt her. In fact, you can actually go onto any of those sponsored platforms and you can read the transcript. She objects to the fact that I've posted the transcript. But you see, it's a public court hearing, and I paid a lot of money. It was like well over $1,000 to get that transcript. You got to pay the court reporter. It's a ripoff going into court. I don't remember exactly how much it was, but they charge you by the page or the word or the minute or whatever they do, and the bill comes out to something huge. So, to counteract lawfare, I'm doing counter lawfare. I'm educating the public about these different things. And by the way, I think most people who watch Crowdsource the Truth would agree that before I started talking about it, I think most people either hadn't heard of it or didn't really have a good sense of what it was. I mean, you hear lawfare, it's like, well, what is that? Okay, obviously the weaponization of the law, but I'm getting into the nitty-gritty details of exactly how it's done. And so by publishing this transcript for everybody to read, you can see in great detail the contradictions in what this incredibly dishonest person is doing. She says in the transcript she never thought I would actually hurt her. So therefore her complaint that I'm putting her under threat of violence fails. Because that statute I just read, everybody, says the person has to be in reasonable apprehension of violence or sexual assault or something. I never said that. I said something about a counter lawfare torpedo going up her ass, but obviously, and that's a picture of me in a submarine. Obviously, I don't have a submarine. There's no such thing as a counter lawfare torpedo, and I'm not sending weapons of war up anybody's ass. By the way, Donald Trump just decided to reposition 2 nuclear submarines. I don't think that's so smart. We might be entering into a dangerous phase of the Donald Trump presidency where his kind of New York real estate tough guy swagger, I don't know, when you threaten the existence of another country, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not so happy with this negotiation and the way everything's been going with the different wars around the country. But back to Nina. The point is, I want to publish that transcript, first of all, so people can see it and see what a liar she is, but also to promote people signing up to the show so I can earn money. And she's acting like I'm doing this. First of all, she brought this whole thing about. So the very notion that I'm doing this to make money from it is completely stupid, not true, contradicted by the facts, logic, everything. But to even make the claim that, oh, Jason shouldn't be allowed to publish the public transcripts from a court hearing because he's making money from it, I mean, that's basically like saying, oh, the New York Times is making money from violence because they want you to pay. I like the shoes. Dog shoes, I like them. That's like saying the New York Times is making money from violence because you have to pay for the newspaper to read about that guy going to 345 Park Avenue South and shooting the place up. This is just the way the commercial news business works. I publish information, try to let people know about it so I can gain subscribers and earn money as a journalist. That's how that works. But again, everything that Nina does is about controlling what people can publish, controlling information. You know, she dresses it up as the Disinformation Governance Board, but she's actually the queen of bullshit. Such a dishonest, horrible person. And so when I state my opinion, like she should be in jail, that's my opinion. You might look at the collection of facts I'm talking about and come to a different conclusion. That's your right. That's why I say that all the time, you know? I was watching, speaking of Lawfare, just before I left, I was watching Tucker Carlson interview Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a kind of a enigma because I do find her very intelligent, and you know, even in the case of Macron's wife, I think the evidence that she raised seemed correct, but she often comes to conclusions that I disagree with. Like, in other words, she was talking about how she's getting sued by Macron, and also talking about other cases of lawfare. She's aware that them bringing it in Delaware was indicative of the high probability that there's some favorable judge there, or they have some way of manipulating the process, but she thinks that by putting it in Tennessee or something, maybe that's where she lives, I don't know. That might be a valid reason to put it there, by the way, but I don't think that means it's going to improve the outcome. I mean, she seems to be in a lot of lawsuits, but maybe she's not as far along as I am. I'm getting pretty close to concluding that I don't know that there's any way at all to win, you know? Could be hopeless. Let me not say that. There's always hope, but I'm close to exhausting all options, at least in district court. You know, that's the thing. This whole business with Nina, This is Arlington Circuit Court. So they're arguing that I should pay their bills because according to her, I'm doing all this just to make money, even though she's the one who brought this case back. I was just waiting for it to expire. And by the way, I had opportunity to revive it in the same way that she did. I forget exactly what the term is. It's like a precipice or a precept or something like that to reopen the case. I could have done that at any time to dissolve it or modify it or whatever. And I actually thought about doing that. And I said to myself, you know what? I have so many other lawsuits happening and just forget it. I don't need to talk about Nina. We'll let this thing run its course and it'll be done. And it's true, I did mention, peripherally things that they now want to allege violated the order. I mean, in other words, when she was in Congress, I said somebody I'm not allowed to talk about was in Congress, and they say, oh, that's violating the order. I'm thinking, you're out of your damn mind, because, I mean, just look at that, how they want me to not speak about her at all. So it goes to some of the disingenuous nature of these filings. Let me think about some of the other stuff that she was saying. So she says she wants me to pay her. She wants me to not be able to file anything against her again in circuit court. They already have an order from Goodman v. Boozy where she was brought in. And the judge in that case, Annalisa Torres, ruled that I'm not allowed to sue her in district court without seeking leave of the court. That's also corrupt, by the way. Person's going the wrong way. That's corrupt because, you see, the thing that people need to understand is the way that case came about. I was talking about Peter Smith, and this all connects to what's happening with the declassification of this John Durham appendix. It's actually very closely linked to that because, remember, John Durham, there were a limited number of prosecutions. I think only 2 or 3 people have been prosecuted in this whole thing. And Durham even said at that hearing where I ran into Ivan Raiklin, who attempted to mention Nina's name at that hearing. Isn't that weird? Raiklin is very close to Flynn. And one thing that Scott McMahon found this morning that I think is one of the most important little juicy nuggets in the declassification document is that Flynn was debriefed. He had a meeting or an email exchange or something like that with John Podesta before he went to that Russia Today dinner where he's photographed sitting next to Putin. And that was a major piece of the puzzle that they used to say that Trump was working for Russia. So you see, this is, get out of here. This is public. You're not telling me what to do. What the fuck do you think is going on here? Go back to whatever oppressive bullshit country you came from, you motherfucker. Tell me to take this off. This is public, asshole. All these fucking people. See, this is what I'm saying. The United States is not going this way. Assholes like that and Nina want to tell you what you can do. I'm running video in here so that if a fucking asshole like that tries to do something stupid, we have it on video. Take it off. I am offended by these people who trespass the First Amendment of the Constitution. This is America, damn it. Get the hell out if you don't like it. Tell me to take that off. What the fuck does that guy think is going on? Where was I? So Flynn, he has this correspondence with John Podesta, of all people, about going to that RT conference. So you see, it's like this. If it was Dubai, and that guy told me, you better take that off, I would do it. Because I'm not a citizen of Dubai. I've been to Dubai. I'm not a citizen there. I'm not intimately familiar with the law there. I don't want to get crossways with the law there. And for all I know, maybe you're not allowed to video record things in public without a permit in Dubai. But I'm not going to stand for that here. And that's what they're trying to do, is to just quietly usher in this nonsense to get you to do. I think there's a way to get to the post office from here, isn't there? No, it might lead to the trains over there. I haven't really utilized this Moynihan train hall all that much. It's pretty new. And they hire idiots like that guy who want to implement Sharia law or whatever he thinks he was doing over there. Don't tell me what to do, man. But you see, what I was getting at is, if you're in Dubai, there are certain things that match the complexion of Dubai. At 6 or 7 o'clock, they started playing that prayer song in the streets of Dubai. And I don't really like the sound of it. And I don't really care for that at all. But it's their city, it's their country, and that's what they're going to do. And people are walking around in candoras. There's certain things where if somebody knocked you out and you woke up in the middle of Dubai, you'd be able to tell it was Dubai. Or you might be able to tell, even without anybody saying explicitly to you that it is, because there are certain markers there. And see, what I'm getting at is all this stuff about Flynn having this email exchange with Podesta and then going to that dinner where he's photographed with Putin. That's the only photograph we ever see of Flynn with Putin. Do we see them out at a bar laughing, whispering in each other's ears? Do we see them at a barbecue having cocktails like Bill Clinton and Felix Sater? Do we see them at a barbecue drinking tab like Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush with George Wallace? No. Do we see them hanging out with Bill Barr and Joe Biden and Patrick Leahy in the 1980s like that photograph that we've seen? No. Do we see loads of photos from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s of them hanging out at all kinds of events like we do with Robert Maxwell and Rupert Murdoch? No. But you see those multiple photos of those guys, they make me think that they know each other pretty well. And nobody ever says, oh, look at those guys hanging out together. They know each other really, really well. They never say that. See, there's actual police, U.S. Federal Postal Police. He didn't say turn the camera off because he seems to know the law better than that idiot working in the train hall. It's my right to video record in here. It's public. Nobody in here has an expectation of privacy. Anyway, the point is, that whole concept of having one picture, this person has moved in here, I noticed. That whole concept of having just one picture of Flynn hanging out with Putin, and they don't even look like they're remotely close to talking to each other. Flynn is playing with some headset that likely is a real-time translation device. Putin is sitting like 3 feet away from him, not even looking at him. Later he says he didn't even know who that was until after the dinner, because the idea was get them next to each other, get a photograph, and then we'll use that as evidence and push this piece of bullshit for 10 years. That's the kind of thing that George and his fucking asshole mentally ill brother do. They concoct some situation where they introduce you to, I don't know, Okie Marshall Richards or something, get you involved in doing podcasts with him, or get you adjacent to him to the point where that's an obvious idea to occur to you. And then they say, oh, what was he doing podcasts with this FBI informant? I didn't know the guy was an FBI informant. Guy with the Nazi rune on his car is speeding through. But so, see, there's certain things that happen that have a certain flavor, you know? I knew that cop wasn't going to say anything because we're not in Dubai. I bet you if you went into the post office in Dubai, they'd say, turn off the video camera. And they wouldn't be polite about it. I did interact with the police a little bit in Dubai. You know, video recording all over the place. Luckily, I usually had permits and letters from some super fancy rich person who had hired us to be there, and that made them all go away. But they're not nice. So I can just tell from what Nina is doing. Here's an electric F-150. You don't see too many of those around anymore. I can tell from what she's doing that they're both cut from the same Lawfare cloth. George's stupid brother. It's almost like they have tactics. You know, that this is all coming from the same school of thought. And then last night or this morning, Mike Benz, who has just been such a jerk. And then people are like, oh, you're being a jerk. One guy on Twitter said, you're being a jerk. We should all work together. And it's like, hey, listen, jackass, you don't know what side of the fence Mike Benz sits on. Don't tell me who I should and shouldn't be working with. That guy has no idea who I should or shouldn't be working with. This dude's crazy. So Mike Benz had a video out where he's saying, oh, this is a breakthrough. There's something in this document talking about critical infrastructure. Nobody has been talking about critical infrastructure but me. This is Mike Benz saying this. But that's completely false. David Hawkins spoke about cognitive infrastructure, and we spoke about how CISA I said, George's brother has been talking about this forever, and it was clear to me that what they had tried to do, see, Benz is calling it the critical infrastructure hoax. And I disagree with that framing. It's confusing. I wouldn't say that it's a hoax. In my view, what they've done is that they're trying to say that the collective cognitive understanding of the United States is critical infrastructure. And that's the internet and information and things that people perceive. By the way, we're in Plaza 33. So think about that. This is a relatively new development here, where this used to be a road that cars would drive through, and if you went to see wrestling or a concert over at the Madison Square Garden there, this is where trucks would drive through, but they've turned it into this kind of walking plaza. And I guess they've hired more. This might be connected to the train yard too. That doesn't seem like an actual cop. That seems more like the dope I was talking to down there. But they're essentially trying to say that the internet and information collectively is critical infrastructure. And by saying that, it gives them a legal framework to have jurisdiction over that. And this is something George's brother has been doing for 8 years. He's been trying to frame what I'm doing as a cognitive threat, in his words. The reason why I'm so opposed to Mike Benz is that I just think he's a bullshit artist, you know? He's a limited hangout guy. He presents this information and it all seems, oh, did this video end? Why did it end? Damn it. Did it end on Twitter as well? It still seems to be live on X. Why did it end on YouTube? Is it live? I don't even know. So many confusing and annoying things happening with the technology. Well, I'll carry on with what I was saying. My live stream has ended. They want to say that the cognitive infrastructure, you know, collective thought, it's all part of this effort to control information, which Nina is doing. And they hate what I'm doing because I'm fighting back with the Constitution. They say, no, we don't want the Constitution. We want an asshole like that down there to just tell you to do something and then you do it. And if everybody will behave like that, then who cares about the Constitution? But back to Candace Owens, and what was confusing me about her is very contradictory in that she kind of gathers all this sort of valid evidence, but then comes to conclusions that either don't make sense to me or I don't agree with, like she's saying. Harvey Weinstein, Michael Jackson, all these people got brought into court and had a completely unfair process, but she's gonna straighten that out. I don't know that she necessarily has a clear plan for how she's gonna do that. I think both of those two guys have a lot of resources in terms of money and lawyers and everything. I don't see how Candace Owens is gonna beat that. And like I said, she didn't lay out a plan for how to beat that. I'm not saying I have a plan. My best plan is I'm just doing away with the lawyer, because I think that was a key part in getting screwed here, is that your lawyer is in on it and they screw you. I don't know who Michael Jackson's lawyer was or Harvey Weinstein's lawyer. Candace Owens said to Tucker Carlson that apparently the opposing lawyer said to Harvey Weinstein, give me $1 million and I'll make this go away. And Harvey Weinstein said no. I wonder if that's true. He wanted to go to jail for the last years of his life rather than just pay $1 million. But anyway, Candace thinks that by moving her lawsuit to Tennessee, somehow she's going to be able to get the best of the president of France. Seems like a flawed plan. She also said, oh, money doesn't matter to me. I was like, really? It's interesting. It seems like the only people who ever say that are people who have a ton of money. Does food matter to you? Because you need to buy that. Who else said that? Chelsea Clinton said, no, money doesn't matter to me. Right, because you have millions of stolen dollars. You know? Money matters to everybody if you want food.
Wow. From 3 years old.
But anyway, she's on the right track that when you get on the wrong side of this, they try to lawfare you to death, to take your money, to take your time, to take your resources. Because those are really the only two things that everybody has, or your health, but that's kind of linked to time and money. Because if you can't buy food and you have nowhere to live, your health is going to deteriorate pretty quickly. So, listen, I hope Candace Owens succeeds against Macron, but I have a feeling that's not the way it's going to work. I mean, my experience in court so far is it's been completely unfair, whether it's district court, appellate court, the Second Circuit, and now we got circuit court in Virginia. That was very unfair. That has advanced to an appeal. I spoke to the appellate court this morning. As much as Nina hated this process, she's got an appeal on her hands now. I have a right to appeal because she reopened the case. So she can do all the complaining that she wants. She brought this about. I already emailed it to her lawyer, so she's going to know this. I'm not revealing anything. They're saying, oh, Jason should be sanctioned and should have to pay the legal fees because he's filing all these frivolous things, forcing Nina to have to, get her attorney involved and running up the legal bill. And I said, first of all, that's ridiculous. She didn't even cite the statute in Virginia. That is the thing that allows you to seek, I forget what the exact term they use, remuneration of these legal fees, award of legal fees. She didn't cite the statute. She's getting into George Webb territory as far as the idiocy of her legal pleadings. It's falling short of being a legitimate legal complaint and more just like a gripe, where she's like, oh, he's mean and I want money and he's making me spend money. The lawyer is super stupid. No case law citations, no statute citations. I think she's got a terrible lawyer on her hands. And I think what they count on is, oh, well, Jason's just an idiot. And this worked 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He's an idiot, just get him into court and then we'll railroad him. Now with Candace, obviously she has a lot of money. She has millions of people following her on social media, but I mean, again, she was talking about Michael Jackson. That dude had hundreds of millions of dollars, and I agreed with what she said about Michael Jackson. I don't think Michael Jackson raped those kids. And I think that because, first of all, I had befriended Michael Jackson's nephew in Los Angeles. I've been over to his house. He's been over to my house. I know his wife and her sisters. He's a nice guy, like a super nice guy from a good family, and we had spoken about that. He was at those sleepovers with his uncle. He's been in interviews. Corey Haim says Michael Jackson never did anything to him, and these kids that have accused Michael Jackson are all from like troubled families, all kinds of crazy stories. I don't want to get into the Michael Jackson thing, but for a long time, I've thought Michael Jackson didn't do that stuff. Yes, he's a weird guy with a weird life and having a whole Disneyland at his house, whatever. But that doesn't mean he did all that other stuff. And still, they were able to ruin him. So I hope that doesn't happen to Candace Owens, but I think she's got some very incorrect conclusions about some correct facts. That's really what I would say. I'm very confused by her because I find myself agreeing with a lot of the stuff she said. She was also kind of trash talking Seth Dillon, which was interesting, and Tucker Carlson agreed with that. I called Seth Dillon, I don't know if I've ever spoken about this, when Babylon Bee got kicked off of Twitter, which was kind of the start of the whole Elon Musk wanting to buy Twitter thing. I called him wanting to interview him, and he just flipped out, which was strange because it wasn't like a Norm Eisen call where I was calling to get him in a gotcha. I didn't even record it because it wasn't, I record those calls where I suspect the person doesn't want to talk to me and the actual phone call will be the only interview. This, I was calling to invite him on the show, and he just acted like an utter dick. So anyway, that's consistent with what those two had experienced, but lawfare is the order of the day. And George's brother was talking about cognitive infrastructure and critical infrastructure. His LinkedIn says that he's a government contractor. His own stupid rhetoric says that he's a government contractor. He's a psychopath and an asshole who has been on me for 8 years, which just doesn't make sense unless somebody is paying you to do that. People are like, oh, you shouldn't fight with George, or you should listen to George. George was making bullshit comments on Twitter today. Anybody who thinks George is not a liar should ask him, George, I'm not trying to troll you, but seriously, what is Jason talking about with this ECF number 12? ECF is electronic court filing number 12 from the Eastern District of Michigan, a case captioned George Webb Swigert versus Cable News Network. George was suing CNN in Michigan. Why? Reeks of what's happening to Candace, right? Where she's getting sued in Delaware. Obviously, that's a venue they specifically selected. But he's suing CNN in Michigan, and this filing number 12, which purports to be a pro se filing from George, but I've pointed to evidence that it's actually been forged by the clerk of the court, Richard Lurie, and filed on behalf of George illegally. After it was late, they backdated it and filed it with the illegal assistance, I allege. These things haven't been proven in court because they keep doing weird things to get the evidence eliminated. That's what George's brother is trying to do now in the Second Circuit. He wants to get a ruling on these allegations so that forever on into perpetuity he can say, oh, res judicata, Jason can't talk about this. The same principle that Nina's stupid lawyer keeps trying to rely on. What did those girls think of the assassination attempt? But I'm saying they all do the same things. So when the same things happen in the same way, you sort of get a sense, when you see garbage on the streets and idiots riding bicycles on the sidewalk, you get a sense that you're in New York. I bet you that doesn't happen in Tokyo. Haven't been there in 15 years, but I don't remember anybody riding a bicycle on the sidewalk. Everybody in Japan was pretty organized and respectful. But they're all doing lawfare. They're all around Ben Wittes. This came about when I was trying to talk to Ben Wittes on Twitter about Peter Smith, who alleged to be communicating with or trying to communicate with Flynn to try to get these 33,000 hacked emails from Hillary Clinton. And remember, Flynn always tells you about his 33 years in the military. He doesn't say more than 3 decades. He doesn't say almost 35 years. He always says 33 years. And how did they arrive at the number 33,000 emails for Hillary Clinton? It's been so burned into the psyche. Trump has referred to 33,000 emails. Everybody thinks it's 33,000 emails, but I think it's actually many, many more than that. And I don't think they came from the DNC getting hacked or anything like that. I think they came from her completely open server that was hosted at her house for the specific purpose of disseminating that information to whoever they want. Remember, Bill Clinton gave these ballistic missile technology secrets to China that allowed them to create their space program? Why did he do that? I don't know, but he did. Well, I mean, I can speculate. David Hawkins used to speak about that, how John, what was his name? What was that guy's name? Who was the Joint Chiefs of Staff with Bill Clinton? And his father was a Nazi. And he said, oh, I've been instructed by the president to give you all of our military secrets. And then that came out that he did that. He gave all those missile technology secrets to China. It seems like that's what Hillary Clinton's homebrew server was doing. And that's what they don't want you to talk about, right? They joke about it, they laugh about it. Oh, her emails, ha ha ha. They want to talk about the Steele dossier and Seth Rich hacking the DNC server. Just, you talk about chatter, right? Look at all the chatter. We're back to all the same nonsense from 2016. Seth Rich, that idiot Ty Clevenger, who used to work with Stephen Biss. He's been co-counsel with Stephen Biss. Clevenger was all over Twitter with some big tweet yesterday. Said, oh, I've seen the Seth Rich autopsy. I said something about nothing we've been told about Seth Rich is true. Where's the autopsy? Where's the death certificate? And that's not the extent of the anomalous evidence around Seth Rich. Why is the FBI involved in that investigation at all? Why would they have become involved in that investigation? That's never been explained. That whole lawsuit with Rod Wheeler and Malia Zimmerman, and you had Manuel Chavez getting sued by the brother, Ed Butowski, who was either represented by Clevenger or something. But Ty Clevenger was talking about this whole Seth Rich business. It's an interesting outfit. Clevenger was talking all about this whole Seth Rich business, and he said, oh, you know, don't disrespect the family and don't talk about this if you don't know what you're talking about. And I just said that's a pretty condescending answer from a guy who used to work with Stephen Biss. Where's the autopsy? Where's the death certificate? And he says he's seen it, but it's under seal and he can't talk about it. And I said, look, no responsible ethical attorney would say something like that. They would just say nothing. And then people pointed out, oh, but Dershowitz did the same thing. And I said, right, I reiterate, no responsible attorney with any sense of ethics would talk about things like that, because if you're not supposed to talk about it, just saying that you've seen it could technically violate the court order. So I said to Clevenger, I don't know, I just looked at your case, your whole FOIA case against the FBI, scanned the filings with artificial intelligence. There's no order sealing the death certificate or the autopsy. What are you talking about? Why don't you show us that order? And then we can evaluate if you've just violated it. And he blocked me. Okay? So instead of saying like, oh, I like Mike Benz, you should be nice to him, or I like George, you should be nice to him, ask these guys these questions. I'm not just telling you that George is a drunk shithead and a lying moron, and that Mike Benz is a highly suspicious former State Department employee who avoids all the information that I have that is exactly about everything that he's talking about. I'm providing specific questions, things that if they have evidence they could present and prove that I'm wrong, and they never do. You know, George will tell you that I'm lying, but he will not present evidence that would prove that I'm lying. Like I'm telling you, I see evidence that he filed a forged document in Eastern District of Michigan with the assistance of a clerk, and if that's wrong, he would have the pro se filing receipt from ECF number 12. You ask him to give you that, he will block you. He cannot present it because he doesn't have it. And so I therefore conclude I'm right and he's wrong. Just like with the photo of Max Urich dead on the roof. If I were wrong, the police would present us with the original photograph and prove me wrong. The fact that these guys won't provide this evidence essentially proves that I'm right. Now with Mike Benz, I'm not sure that I have the same kind of smoking gun, oh, he's lying, but it is interesting how he always seems to go to whatever hole I'm looking into and he attempts to cover it up. So he's like, oh my God, I'm the only one talking about, you know, critical infrastructure and how this information control grid was trying to make critical infrastructure a thing that they control. Well, I've only been talking about that for 5 years, and Hawkins was talking about the whole 5G cognitive. Remember that thing that Hawkins had with little cartoon pictures, that those diagrams he found from some Huawei, or wasn't it Huawei, or maybe it was University of Wuhan University or Huawei? I can't remember. I just posted it again on X this morning for people to look at if you're interested. But I'm just saying, it seems to me the most important aspect of this Trump-Russia hoax that nobody is talking about is that once that Steele dossier was essentially gutted after, you know, it came out in July. See, and here's something interesting. This bolsters what I was saying. They've said, oh, July 26th, this Julia, whoever it is, sends an email saying, this is perfect. We're gonna say that, you know, Trump is doing whatever, telling Russia to hack. That exactly coincides with what I said previously. I said, hey, look at this. Trump is doing this press conference where he said, someone asks him, what about Putin? Okay, so that's exactly like, hey, Jason, here's Oki Marshall Richards. Why don't you hang out with Oki Marshall Richards? Or it's exactly like, hey, RT, why don't you put Michael Flynn at this dinner and sit him next to Putin? You plant that. And Putin's like, yeah, whatever. You have some retired military US guy coming to give a speech at a dinner. We're trying to normalize relations with the United States by having a state-funded news organization in Washington, D.C. I'll go to the dinner. You know, this is diplomacy, normal stuff. He doesn't know what's going to happen next. And everyone's like, oh, you're smarter than Putin? No, I'm not saying I'm smarter than Putin. I'm saying hindsight is 20/20. I'm sure Putin knows this now too. But this was 8 years ago or 9 years ago, 2016, they had this dinner. And I mean, if I knew then what I know now about Oki Marshall Richards, he would have never gotten near me. But the point is, they set these traps and then they spring them later. And so they have a whole narrative planned out, and they know we need this to happen, that to happen, and the next thing to happen. And I'm not saying they always work perfectly, but they're planting these things, and then they're springing the traps. Have we been through this thing? Maybe, but it's nice and overgrown now. Little garden. Yeah, no, I've been through here and saw those twins in there. Garden of Renewal.
Sit over there, I'll find you guys.
After you. So they plant these traps, They, what was I talking about there?
What do you like then? I think you're both so different. It's hard to
You know, they say, hey, Flynn, you're going to go have dinner with Putin. I think Flynn was in on it. That's my opinion. That's why he's talking to Podesta. He used to work for Obama. And the plan is, just like with George, you're going to double-cross Trump, right? You're going to say, oh, you know, George approached me. He was like, hey, I can be an ally. We work together. And they did the same thing with Quinn Michaels. And then they tried to do the same thing with Ian Carroll, right? He's like, oh, who's producing this interesting video about Quinn Michaels? I have so many followers on X. I'm commenting on your post. You're going to probably want to talk to me. You know, they have a good sense of what it is you might want. Putin wants RT to be successful in Washington, D.C. because he figures, hey, we need a media presence in the United States because that's diplomacy, or maybe you want to look at it from the standpoint of that's modern information warfare or whatever. Clearly, Russia wanted RT to succeed. So they know Putin's going to the dinner, or maybe they even orchestrated that, who the hell knows. They put these things together, and then they spring them on you later. Where's that band? That's how it works. This is all lawfare. It's all coming from the same people. So that's Ben Wittes, right? This is what I was getting at. So nobody wants to talk about, right, he's at that meeting. Some journalist says, what about Putin? Now, maybe that was an organic comment, or maybe somebody told that person to go there and say that. Get him talking about Putin, move him towards the hacking of the email server, and ask him this series of questions or whatever. And sometimes nobody takes the bait and the plan fails, and sometimes it works spectacularly well. In this case, Trump says, oh, you know, Russia, if you're listening, you should hack Hillary Clinton's emails and send them to the press. And they say, boom, that's perfect. So from July through November, they're working on this narrative that Russia hacked, but really all they need to do is say, oh, the Trump campaign is under investigation. And that's not really the same level as the second phase that I'm about to describe, but all they really wanted to do, in my estimation, was to convince people that, like, oh, how can you vote for somebody who's under FBI investigation? And if you think about it, it's the number one thing they were worried about what was going to happen to Hillary. She should have been under FBI investigation for using this illegal server at her house, giving out all these emails to whoever. Look at that little dog. Oops. Oh, I missed him. She should have been under FBI investigation, and they probably calculated that will be terrible for the campaign. Nobody will vote for somebody who's under FBI investigation, so let's make it so that Trump is under FBI investigation, turn it around on him. And when that failed and he won, they said, holy crap. Now we actually need some tangible evidence to frame him and get him removed. Because convincing the public of something on the news is one thing. Getting somebody impeached, it becomes more of like a court type process, and that's going to require evidence. So that's when they shifted. Obama has that December 8th meeting that we've also heard about from this declassification, where he says, I don't like this intelligence community assessment that Russia did nothing. We need a new one that says that Russia hacked. Go get me some evidence that Russia hacked. That's where Peter Smith comes in. Because the next day, Adam Sharp resigns from Twitter, gives that press release on December 28th saying that he left December 9th. He's off doing whatever the hell he's doing, seems to be linked to George's brother, to Ben Wittes, peripherally, you know, certainly, and to Valerie Caproni. Where are your parents, kids? Wow. Pretty brave. You're laughing. This is New York City. You shouldn't have your little kids a half a block away from you. But whatever, they're kids. Adam Sharp is out there doing whatever the hell he's doing. But what they're trying to do is, from December 28th, see, everybody's ignoring this, but it's obviously quite important because Ben Wittes sends it to James Comey. James Comey doesn't like sit around thinking about it for a month. He immediately forwards it to Andrew McCabe, Jim Baker, who later becomes the general counsel of Twitter. At the time he gets this email, he's the general counsel of the FBI. He's involved in this Durham prosecution with the attorney, what's his name? Maxwell Mishkin. Mishkin is representing Eric Lichtblau. It's the same attorney that comes to represent Chris Boozy when I'm in a lawsuit with Chris Boozy and Ben Wittes. Although Ben Wittes doesn't get involved until George's idiot brother sends a Twitter message to Ben Wittes and Nina saying, hey, Chris Boozy is about to go into default and Jason is going to win this lawsuit against him. George's brother tweeted at them, and the next day, Ballard Spahr comes to represent Chris Boozy. Isn't that weird? Why did that happen if they're not connected? If Ben Wittes isn't very worried about me winning this lawsuit? This is obviously a Lawfare network and involves Adam Sharp, George's brother, Ben Wittes, Chris Boozy, Shane Harris, Maxwell Mishkin at Ballard Spahr, this prosecution of Sussman in the Durham investigation, and nobody but nobody is talking about this December 28th email pertaining to Peter Smith and the Matt Tate dossier. It's got nothing to do with the Steele dossier. But it's even written in a way so as to confuse. It's vague. And I think Wittes knows that because he's an expert at these kind of lawfare games. So, I mean, again, when I say Matt Taibbi is a limited hangout and a bullshit artist, I'm not saying that because I think he looks like a dunce wearing a baseball cap on the news. I realize I'm wearing a baseball cap right now, but I'm outside on an overcast day, not sitting in a studio. I'm not saying it because I think he's an absolute idiot. I'm saying it because I've seen evidence that he's involved with people who seem to work for the FBI and that he's putting out limited hangout stories that I think are intended to deceive people. What'd you think about the Donald Trump assassination attempt? Totally fake? I mean, set up to try to, not that kid on the roof, right? Something else. No, all right. You said hello, so I wanted to say hello. Take it easy. I've sort of broken my tradition by asking a dude what he thinks of the assassination attempt, but nothing else came to mind. And when people say hello, good to get their opinions. That wasn't a very interesting one. I don't know, ask people on the street what they think about these complicated things. They're not going to really have anything to say. The point is, I've been talking about this email for a long time. And I mean, it came out of Ron Johnson's Homeland Security and Government Accountability Senate Committee. It's not some stupid random piece of evidence. And by the way, I don't think you can get it on the internet anymore. It's been removed. I still have it, posted it on X and stuff, but this is why they've been after me for 8 years, because I've been talking about the heart of this matter. Not because I'm so smart, because, you know, George is the one who got me in with Charles. He set up that initial interview, and that's where Shane Harris called Charles, because George is involved in this, okay? That's why his idiot brother has been suing me for 8 years. Peter Duke, all these stupid people who hang around with George, I allege, are limited hangout liars. So if you're sending him money, I think you're a sap. That's my opinion. You might hold a different opinion. Anyway, that's all I really want to say about this right now. We'll talk about it some more, but please become a sponsor on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com. You can read all this stuff. Subscribestar.com and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Get onto X, follow on X at JG_CSTT. Nina, you're going to have to deal with this filing. I mean, you don't have to deal with it, actually. That's the point. You could just wait for the court to rule. If you think it's frivolous, do nothing. If you're so worried about running up your legal bill and what I'm filing is so frivolous, do nothing. According to you, the court will just dispose of these things, and then that will be it. But in actual fact, what she's trying to do is to intimidate me. They're upset that I've broken the rules, the lawfare rules, with counter lawfare. See, they want me to be represented by an attorney because they know they destroy my social media platforms, they prevent me from being able to earn money, they hit me with tons of lawsuits, and unlike Candace Owens, suddenly money becomes very important to me because I won't have any of it and I won't be able to continue. But by doing all this pro se, I've been able to break their system. So help me do that. Help me continue. Become a sponsor. Keep the counter lawfare effort going. Sponsor the show. And maybe we can get a good outcome here. We'll see. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay safe. It looks like it's going to rain again. There was a flood watch yesterday. I tried watching that a little bit, but didn't get to see the flood. Thanks, everybody.